Hey there, happy Friday. Hopefully things are going well wherever you are, or at least as well as they can under the circumstances. We're all kind of doing our own thing, so we made it to the end of a week, and we're headed onto the weekend. And now coming up this weekend, the big thing, I think, in a lot of circles is that we've got the documentary, The Last Dance, coming up on, I guess, Netflix, wherever you are. Netflix, I think, is the one in Canada, so I think that's the one that's available for us. And then I guess, I feel like it's HBO or ESPN, I can't remember what it is out of the States. Probably Netflix as well, to be honest with you. So that's going to be the big thing this weekend. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So this is going to be more of a just kind of a sit-down chat video. I did have a pickup this week. Things that, like I said, have been kind of tapering down. I think there'll be some stuff coming in as well soon because I saw some stuff that was fitting into the collection well. I've been trying to be very responsible because I've wanted to kind of make sure that I shore up some other things in my own side of the world. Things are going pretty well for me. I'm still in the vein of working from home. I think we've been about a month now that we've been doing that. So I think everybody on the team has acclimated pretty well where I work. Obviously, some folks are kind of missing, going out and interacting in the office a little bit. But as time has gone on, for my job, it's very easy for me to actually operate this way because really I just need the laptop and internet and my phone, and I'm pretty much good to go for what I do. I basically administrate an office application, and I make sure if something breaks, I fix it. If something needs to be reconfigured, I do that, and that's basically what I do. So really, I just need the computer, and I've got my second screen and everything, and that's kind of how I operate. So anyway, as I said, there was a pickup this week. Picked up one from the Medano collection, so we're back to the hockey stuff a little bit. I did do the 56 Topps on the last video, which I enjoyed. The overhead shot seemed to work pretty well, so I was happy with that. So I picked up this one. This is a 1997-98 Donruss Elite status parallel of the base card. So I'll show that to you. I'm going to try to capture it a little bit here. It's a die cut, and it's got, kind of the rainbow foil thing going on, which is cool. One thing I'll tell you, so this one here is the third parallel. So there's the base card, then there's the middle parallel, which is aspirations, and then there's this one here, the status. And that's how they set that up, and that is numbered to 100. So you can see that there, hopefully. There we go. Okay. So hopefully with some editing magic, that didn't take as long as it did for me. Anyway, so this card is actually a really sweet card. Part of that middle to late 90s section of the collection that I really am enjoying working on. So as far as pickups, I've been keeping the cost down for the most part because I've been focusing really on that mid to late 90s sweet spot. And I'm a big fan of what I've been able to pick up the last little while on it because nobody's really looking for it. In comparison to that Jordans that I referenced, Michael Jordan cards, I should say, mid to late 90s Medanos really aren't doing that much on the market. I will say that cost-wise, they're pretty much exactly where they were before. I'm just taking a look here. I wanted to kind of show you where this one falls. Here we go. So I'm going to just take this one out here, and I'll give you a quick sneak peek because I'm going to be making another video. I will have another vintage baseball card video as well. So I'm trying to get a couple of videos in the can and starting to work on some of those because it's been a good opportunity to also look back at what's already in the collection. But I want to kind of look at this, and I'll give you a bit of sneak preview of an idea I had. So I'll show you from the binder here. So if you can see that. So as I said, you got the base card. There's the middle one. There's the aspirations. And then there's the new status that I picked up. And then this here is the subset card. So that's generations. And then there would be one right here. And then that is the gold version of the generations as well. So this one here, I actually picked up on Comsi. So that one is sitting there waiting for an opportunity for me to ship it out. And then once that's done, that little subset will be completed. That does lead me to a question though. So technically that is the rainbow of both of those completed from that set, which is awesome. I always like when I can complete a little subsection there. And there's some other ones in there in that binder as well that I'm gonna get a chance to show you hopefully. I have a kind of a random question to ask you. It won't be the main thing that I'm talking about in this video, but just a question that I have, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. Obviously, when we're talking about a rainbow, we're talking about getting all the cards available, so the base card or insert card or whatever, and any parallels. So that's kind of your rainbow. Pacific was famous for this, and Topps Tech. If you take it to the next level, you can talk about Topps Tech. That's insane. That'll be a conversation for another day. But what do you guys think about when you've got a set where maybe one of the parallel cards is a 1 of 1? where maybe a big time collector has the one of one, or maybe you just have never seen it. Obviously, I don't think you can really consider it a completed rainbow without the one of one, because technically that's part of the rainbow. But at the same time, I almost feel like it should have its own designation, because when you've got a one of one in there, you literally only one person can complete it if they're so inclined. And if it's stuck in purgatory somewhere, it's stuck in a box, especially stuff that's over 20 years old, like some of these cards are, there's almost no shot of finishing that. So that's just kind of something that was in my mind as I was planning on adding this to the binder, and I was looking at some of the other inserts and base sets and things where I've got everything except for the one of one. So to me, as far as I'm concerned, it's complete. Just because, like, realistically, maybe I'll come across it if I'm absolutely lucky, and if I find a seller who's willing to work with me on it a little bit. But I'm probably not going to pay, top dollar for it just to complete that. But at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, I consider it to be complete for my purposes. So I just wanted to know kind of what your thoughts were on that. Now, the main reason that I brought up, so now getting into the main thing I wanted to talk about, the Last Dance documentary. And one of the things that I've noticed, and kind of what inspired this part of the video, is I saw a video from Silver Jackify from yesterday, and it was very succinctly named. Top 10 cards, dollar value, on the rise, or have fallen during COVID-19 in my baseball card collection. I'm not sure if you could have gotten more buzzwords in there, but very nice. I'll include a link in the description to that video. It's very well done. I actually like the video. Generally speaking, I like Silver Jackify's videos anyway, but this one was a good one. It was interesting because he took some cards in his collection, and what he did is he compared the price in January for these cards versus the price in April. And I love stuff like that because I'm very analytical and I enjoy seeing comparisons of that type. Now, that played very well into some videos that I've been watching recently. And I enjoy checking out different kinds of hobby content, different videos. I don't always comment, so if I check out one of your videos, I may not throw a comment in there. I'm going to try to get better at that, but that's not always what I'm good at. Ironically, I'm asking for feedback in this video, but I'm not terribly good at leaving comments myself. I'm trying to get better at it. But the thing is, a lot of the videos that I was watching lately, there's been a lot of them where you've got this spring of investment sports card channels. So you've got, I think it's called Sportcard Investor, and I check them out because I'm interested in seeing what they do and say, and I'm not going to accuse them of anything. That would be unfair because I don't know enough to say. And I listen to the House of Jordan's podcast. So this is very basketball centric. And I like what they do because they take a very analytical approach. But sometimes I question their conclusions. And if I was more conspiratorial, I would ask if there isn't like a concerted effort to try to paint a rosier picture of the market than I would probably paint. And I'll explain why in a second. But the point is, a lot of them are really talking up a lot of the movement in the card market. And Silver Jackify states this in a different way because he's not drawing necessarily major conclusions on it. Like a lot of folks, he's a little bit surprised that the market seems to be going very robustly. In fact, for some cards, the market seems to be going up. The Jordan thing sort of makes sense. Like the Kobe thing made sense because when Kobe passed away, some people were really taking advantage of it. It's kind of shady, it's kind of shifty, but it's to be expected. When a famous celebrity passes away, all of a sudden their autographs go up in value. Any memorabilia goes up in value. That always happens. I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying it's normal and it's expected. The Jordan thing is just now you're getting attention. Anything that draws attention to a player will potentially bring interest to his memorabilia and or cards. So that, again, makes sense to a certain degree. One of the other factors they're throwing in there, though, is when we're talking about the pandemic, people are kind of at home and they're extrapolating now. And when you get into assuming things about people's behavior and their mindset, it gets a little dangerous and it gets a little tricky, and I don't always agree with it, but I'll kind of tell you what they're concluding with it. They're thinking in the sense that their assumption is because people are at home, no sports on the TV, you can't gamble, you don't, these outlets that normally people have related to sports, suddenly they're not there. And then they're looking at, maybe they're looking at sports cards as a different kind of outlet and then going into that market. So you've got the combination. So you've got three groups. You got kind of the casual folks that are kind of coming in to maybe get some kind of a memento from Jordan, inspired by this recent coverage of Michael Jordan, for maybe a generation that isn't as familiar with his work. Then you've got the collectors themselves, and then you've got the investor group. And I think a lot of these things and podcasts and things are kind of leaning towards that investor group. They're talking mostly to that audience, although there's a little bit of carryover to the collecting audience. Oh, one other thing. So at this point, I'm going to take a quick pause. I'm going to have a sip of my drink. If you've got your own, cheers to you again. Good luck wherever you are. Hopefully things are going well for you. I actually wanted to do that at the beginning. I completely forgot. So anyway, I understand their data points, and I'm not going to argue with the data points because when you're looking at it objectively, so it's objective and subjective. When you're looking at objectively, you're looking at the price being lower before and being higher now. Well, clearly it's gone up. That I can't argue that. Unless I've got different data that suggests otherwise, which I don't, I can't argue that piece. But then they take it a step further, and Silver Jacobite isn't doing this. That's why I like the video, because I think all he's doing is showing the observation. Here's the price in January, here's the price in April. Draw your own conclusions. Where these other ones are doing it in a different way, which I don't necessarily like, and I think it feels a little self-serving, is that they're taking the idea and then extrapolating it further. And the thing is, when you're doing anything like that, you're playing into an economic model. And when you do an economic model, the problem with that is your economic model is only as good as your underlying assumptions. And what that really means, all that means is I have to assume something. I have to assume that people are going to behave in a certain way because that's what my prediction is going to be based on. So assumption number one, the American economy, and like I said, I'm speaking from Canada, so I'm doing it as an observer. I'm not participating in that market actively, so I can't speak to that. And by the way, this whole part now that I'm talking about is 100% opinion. I'm not going to make any big declarations. I'm simply going to say what I think, and I welcome any feedback. If you totally disagree with me, you think I'm dumb, and I have no idea what I'm talking about, cool. Why? That's all I want. I just need to understand why, and I'd love to get your perspective on that. But my thought process is, assumption number one, they're saying the American economy was really strong before the pandemic. I don't completely agree with that. You can make the argument. There's metrics that you can use to try to do it, but there's things that I would say challenge that. And that would take an entire video in and of itself and graphs, and and probably 99% of you would be bored to tears. But let me give you the short version. The thing that makes me question that a little bit, that assumption specifically, is that think of how little time it took. Relatively speaking, like I said, we've been, in my company, we've been working from home exclusively for about a month. You got shelter-in-place orders. You think of New York, you think of some of the states that have been harder hit, things like that. It didn't take very long for the pressure to mount quickly to try to do some kind of relief. The stimulus, that those checks and all that happening. Why? Why did it need to happen seemingly not long after, a lot of these states started shutting down? Because a lot of businesses operate nearly, not paycheck to paycheck, that's not really the term we're looking for, but as money's coming in, money's going out. Money's coming in, money's going out. So from a business standpoint, the margins are thin enough that there isn't a reserve. It's not like they can afford to sit and have the business closed for any extended period of time. They needed help right away. Similarly, a lot of people were in that same boat. They're operating paycheck to paycheck. Rent's coming due, mortgages are coming due, bills are coming in, all this is happening. And as the money comes in, it almost immediately shoots right back out from where it came from because it's going to all these different things they've got to pay. So that means these people needed financial assistance. They didn't have savings. They didn't have all this stuff. Ideally, you'd love for them to have it, but if they did, then it wouldn't have been such a panic situation to immediately get relief. Obviously, there'd be folks who would still need it, but the sheer amount of folks that immediately went into unemployment because businesses had to either furlough them or lay them off or do whatever almost immediately. You just have to think of how fast it happened overall. Immediately, you had millions of people on unemployment, almost overnight. And you can't be surprised, but at the same time, you have to think that that doesn't speak to a lot of stability because a lot of the economy was running on, you basically have to keep things going. The spending has to keep going. People have to keep getting money in that they immediately spend or that they pay their bills with or whatever. And if something upsets this cycle, it doesn't take long for the whole thing to kind of disintegrate. And you have to kind of throw money back in to kind of force the wheel to keep moving. And that's basically what was going on. Not for everybody, but for enough people where it was something they had to address. And now the reality is probably they're going to have to look at addressing it more. That doesn't strike me as a strong base to begin with because it meant that you were operating on so much debt and leverage that if the money stopped coming in, even for a little while, almost immediately you have to go into panic mode to resolve it. So that's really as far as I want to go with that. You could go a lot deeper with it, but that's the thought process I have going in. Now we're talking about the present. At the present, it's not exactly a big factor because there are collectors still who have, some reserves and they can afford to buy stuff. Maybe they're still working, or maybe they have some money set aside and they've got a collecting budget and they're able to go and buy things. So for now, it's fine. It works. And then it's the supply and demand curve. So right now, I haven't noticed, and this is where, again, I would ask you a question. Maybe if you're paying closer attention than I have been, I haven't started looking into it until just the last little while. I don't feel like there's been that much of an increase in volume in terms of the amount of stuff available, like on eBay or ComC or one of these other markets. I don't feel like the amount of supply has increased that much yet. But as these prices are starting to come in and people are noticing, hey, my favorite one right now is the 1990-91 Skybox. I love this. I love this one in particular. Because think about it. Today on YouTube, as I speak to you, earlier today, this afternoon, I was watching a video with somebody open up 2 boxes of 1990-91 Skybox. And they pulled 5 Jordans out of 5 boxes. Sorry, 2 boxes. 5 Jordans. You can go on to ComC right now as I speak to you and get the Jordan card, ungraded, for $4. The nicer graded one was $4.17. Go nuts. $4. And on eBay, it's going for, I think, like $100, $150, $200. And then you've got the late 80s Fleer cards are going absolutely crazy. The 1990 Fleer card is going crazy. Like there's a lot of those that have been going up. Again, you can attribute some of that to the promotion and to the elevated status of Jordan in terms of attention right now based on the documentary coming up. Because it's not like people didn't know who Michael Jordan was, but there's a whole generation that never got the chance to see him play, where basically all they know is that he played basketball, but he's basically a shoe brand. If you really think about it, he's a shoe and apparel brand for that entire generation. So showing them some of the background, talking about that last Bulls championship, gives them a little bit of context and says, no, Michael Jordan was a player, and he was a player who won a lot of championships with this team, and here's the story of one of those teams. So it gives them a little bit more background to be able to associate it a little bit more. You can see clips of the games, you can see all that, and that gives attention. So that aspect is totally valid. That part of the analysis, I agree with 100%. Totally. The second part of it, as far as people being a little bored, maybe having some time on their hands, and then maybe putting their energies into cards as a way of getting some kind of a sports thing, I could buy that to a certain degree. But then my question becomes this. As the prices are going up, and Jordan is just one example, the 89 Upper Deck Griffey has been going up like crazy as well. I think the PSA 10, I think the whole thing is that it cleared $1,000 for the PSA 10, which is nuts if you really think about it. Again, not surprising because it feels like right now there are people looking for the next thing to go into, because Griffey hasn't done anything new. So the Jordan example doesn't work for him. It's just that people are looking at like, oh, well, there's a Hall of Famer, or, a high-graded rookie of a Hall of Famer. There's one of a Hall of Famer. There's another one of a Hall of Famer. Well, you're just looking at you're basically grasping at straws to find something to kind of throw your money into. That's where I feel like there's a lot of investors who are throwing their money into it. The thing is, though, if that's true, and again, I'm making assumptions. I'm being clear about this. I am making assumptions. I could be totally wrong. But if the investors are throwing their money in there, then the presumption is that at some point they'll be able to turn it around and sell it for more money. I think in the short run, I think that's pretty reasonable. I think they've got a shot at pulling that off, especially as the Jordan documentary continues on. It's going to go on over 5 weeks, so it's 2 episodes per week. So there's going to be a little while here where Jordan's definitely going to get a boost. The Griffey one, I'm a little bit more perplexed about. I'm not sure what exactly led to that one. There could be other factors that I'm not considering. But the fact is, my question becomes, when I said earlier about my challenge to the first assumption about the strong economy, the second assumption that a lot of these channels and podcasts and things are taking is that when things settle down a little bit and the curve starts, flattening out a little bit, states will start opening back up, and then it'll be business as usual. They're basically arguing that it'll be business as usual. People will get back to work, money will start coming in again, and then people will immediately go back to spending. Okay, I think that's a stretch, but let's play it out. Let's say this is true to a degree. It's not going to activate for everybody at the same time. Not all the states are going to be able to get going and immediately flip the switch and start. There are some that are less affected that may be able to ramp up a little bit quicker. And then New York State, for example, is probably not going to be able to ramp up as quick. That's just my take on it, looking at it from a distance. I don't see how they could fire it up as quickly and get people back to work as quickly and then, reinitiate all kinds of activity like before. And that's not taking into account that some people are probably going to be a little nervous to, they're not going to be in a hurry to jump on the subway again. Even if they have to go to work, they have to go to work. But at the same time, they're not going to be super eager to jump on the subway to go do all these things and whatever. And if you were out of work even for a couple of weeks and you realize how tenuous your hold on your finances was, or even a couple of weeks off, put you in that position where suddenly you were worried if you could afford to pay your rent and things. Maybe your landlord gave you a bit of an extension. At some point, they expect to get their money. And this is the other shoe that a lot of folks in the card community aren't talking about, even if they're talking about the economics of it. But a lot of folks in the economics community are talking about real estate stuff. Those landlords and things, eventually they expect to get their money. They're giving certain allowances and they're doing their own things with their own banks and their financial institutions, getting forbearance and all that. And I'm not going to get into all that in this video because I've turned this into a sports card channel because I want to focus on that. But there is a whole economic underpinning of this that applies to all kinds of things, not just cards, but things. But if they're going to have that, eventually they're going to go to their tenants and expect to get their money. The banks are going to expect to get their money. Everyone's going to expect to get their money. But if things don't ramp up right away, and even if you get your job back, if you're out of it, and you're not getting the same amount of hours as before, or maybe you come back, but you're coming back at a reduced rate because the company's like, well, we were shut down for weeks, so we're not going to be able to go back up to full speed. So, would you agree to come back at a reduced rate or reduced hours for a while to help us out? Or maybe they look at it and go like, we were real close to being in a danger zone here. We got some money to kind of tide us over, but we're going to have to run this, and we don't think we don't think we're going to be able to sell as much stuff right away. So we had 10 people, we laid 10 people off, but we're going to rehire some of them, but maybe we're going to rehire 7 or 8 instead of 10. So those 2 or 3 are still out of work. They're going to have to go find a job doing something else. And that could go all across all kinds of industries and all kinds of places. I'm not trying to be negative, and I'm not trying to throw cold water on it. It's going to feel like that, but I'm really not. I'm just saying, I feel like there's more things that aren't being considered. And I think it's irresponsible that some of them are painting this almost overly rosy picture. And it could very well be. I could totally be wrong. They could be right. And it could all be awesome and everything's great and you're back to normal and you go back to your spending ways. And God help you the next time that there's a real economic crisis because you still don't have any savings. I'm not a big saver myself, by the way. I'm not making any judgments on you because I've always kind of operated on the thing where I like stuff. I like stuff. Sports cards and other things. So I've got my hobbies. I like watches. All that costs too much money, by the way. Way too much money. But the point is, I like stuff. But even this, where I'm still working during this whole process, I'm getting my full paycheck. I'm still getting my hours. And I know I'm fortunate in that sense. And I know that I'm fortunate that my job allows me to do that. But even in that case, I'm still at the same position where, if nothing else, this whole thing should, I hope, at least force you to consider your situation, at least look at it objectively. You got to kind of stand back and go, all right, where am I at? What, assess your situation. And in my case, I was like, no, I'm in a position where still working, the money's still coming in. That's all good. That doesn't mean I have to shut down the hobbies completely, but it means I should probably slow down. I am saving money because I'm at home. I'm not paying for transit. I'm not paying, my electric bill is lower because they lowered the rate that they're charging for electricity. To kind of counter some of the expenses because people are going to be at home more. So they understood, so that was understood by my province that I'm in. So they made that adjustment. So that's good. And one of the things that I looked at was, if I needed it, do I have enough, cheap credit to be able to operate, give myself some runway if I need it? The answer was yes. I went and ran the numbers and looked at it, and I could go 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and it would suck at the end of that, but I could run even if I lost my job tomorrow. And I needed to run that worst case scenario out to kind of understand where I was at. Again, I'm not trying to dwell on the negative. I just needed to be realistic. I needed to understand where my situation was. So I looked at that and I said, okay, that's good. I'm not in a bad spot. But at the same time, I said, well, I'd like to be in a better spot. I don't want to rely on that. That needs to be, that's not plan B. That should be like plan C or plan D. That should be, in case of emergency, break glass. So one of the things that I did is I said, okay, well, I'm still doing my thing. I'm getting my paycheck in, and I'm saving some money. Instead of immediately running to go buy 100 cards, or even some really expensive ones, I said, well, let me still buy some stuff that I like, that looks good, that I enjoy as part of my collection. But at the same time, let me put some aside. I want to have a little bit more of a rainy day fund, even though I'm not traditionally a saver guy. I said, let me do that. Let me put some of that aside to make sure. And I'm just doing that as a precaution for myself because I wanted to make sure that I, in a similar situation again, wouldn't have to really worry about it because I have my backup, but then I also have my conventional backup. The regular rainy day fund that most people should have. And if you've already got that, then you're good to go. Don't worry about it. Do whatever you want. But I think there are some people who may take this time to realize that they did not have that, and that it makes for some tension and anxiety, and they may not immediately jump back. Even after they get back to work and are able to collect their paychecks again, they're not immediately going to run back, and buying cards may not necessarily be their first priority upon re-entering the workforce and the market. And in that same vein, going to the other end of that as well, they may already have their collections, and they may sit there and going like, I don't want to feel like this again. I don't want to be in that uncomfortable, anxious situation. Like I said, I was able to assess it. I didn't need to be anxious. I was able to just look at it and go, where am I at? Okay, I think I'm good, but I could be in a better spot. In their case, they may be like, I was in a super dangerous spot. I needed that stimulus check just to keep the lights on, so to speak. But that's a dangerous spot to be in because you're right there at that borderline. Maybe you've got your collection of stuff and you could be like, maybe some of this can go, especially if the prices are high like they are right now for some stuff. You could be like, some of this can go. Well, how that plays into this whole conversation that I'm having with you in this really long video, and I apologize it's really long, but there's a lot that I had on my mind about this. Where that plays into it though, is if they then think that, then they may go to eBay or whatever and start selling some of their stuff, and all of a sudden the supply goes up. So my question is, after all of this, if that happens, so if you've got people that are a little bit gun shy to buy, and then they're wanting to convert some of their cards into cash to be able to have for their own purposes, whatever that may be, then the market gets a little bit more, the volume goes up in terms of that. Will there be the buyers to absorb the new volume? Because there's people that are buying it right now at these higher prices. But once they've had their stuff, are they going to buy, if they're buying that 1990 Skybox Jordan PSA 10, are they going to buy 5 of them? Are they going to buy 10 of them? Like I said, two Skybox boxes in one YouTube video, 5 Jordans came out of it. Maybe there may not be a PSA 10 amongst them, but there may be a couple of 9s or something. But the point is, it's not like they're not in abundance. In the COMC here, there may not be a single PSA 10 amongst them, but there may be a couple of 9s in here. You're telling me you can't get a mint Jordan in a group? I've bought PSA 10s from COMC. It can be done. People do put mint cards on there sometimes. Again, it is luck of the draw. I'm not saying you go do it and you'll definitely get one. I'm saying it's possible. The point is, there's enough of those. They printed enough of them that the math is in your favor if you're able to get enough of them in your hands. And if there are enough of them out there, will the price be able to sustain? The answer is probably not. Honestly, if I'm being honest, the answer is probably not. Then that's a Jordan thing, and if once the documentary is a little bit in a rearview mirror, those prices may not sustain for that card. But I'm also looking at, like I said, if you've got a bunch of collectors who have been helping the market up until this point, who maybe are buying cards, even though they probably shouldn't be, kind of to take their mind off it, when the money dries up, they're going to stop. And if that happens, those investors and those ones that kept pushing up those higher and higher prices, are they going to be able to then buy from themselves to keep the thing sustaining? That's just a question. I genuinely don't know the answer to it, but I keep thinking and looking back on it, and I go, a lot of it is going to depend, and that assumption about things just flipping the switch and suddenly everything's back to normal, I don't know if that's true. And the longer it goes, even if things start getting turned on, some states are going and other states are not, you're going to be operating at diminished capacity, not everybody's going to get back to work right away. That's all going to affect how the money that's out there for things like hobbies. And that's the thing where if you're on reduced hours, you're going to worry about your rent, you're going to worry about your electricity, your utilities, your food on the table. You're going to worry about all that first. The PSA 10 Skybox Michael Jordan is probably going to be low on that totem pole of scale. That's kind of where I'm looking at it from. And then again, the other shoe to drop about the whole real estate thing, that could be impactful. And it's one of those things where that hasn't hit yet. We don't know what the consequences are of deferring payments and people getting those breaks for now that eventually will end. And you'll have all those people that are going to expect to get that money, and how that's going to affect everything. It's a lot to chew on. So I apologize. It is a really long video. I'm going to try to cut it down to a little bit more reasonable. It's going to be long. There's nothing I can do. So cheers to you if you made it to the end of this. I appreciate it. But my question is, what do you think about this? Am I overthinking this whole thing? Maybe I am. But I feel like there's a lot more to it. There's layers. I don't think it's as simplistic as a lot of these podcasts and YouTube channels are making it out to be. They're just looking at the raw data, which I don't disagree with. Like I said, I agree with a lot of what they're saying. But I feel like they're taking this conclusion in this short period of time and then drawing it and just expanding and just saying, well, if it went up 10x during this period of time, well, then it'll go up another 10x in the next period of time and another 10x. I'm not using 10x as a literal thing, but I'm saying they're just assuming because it's going up that the same factors are going to continue. And I don't necessarily see what evidence there is of that. I think the crash that some folks were anticipating with the card market didn't take into account that some folks are just going to stubbornly cling on to the idea that they have more money than they actually have for longer. But then reality eventually sets in. And there are some collectors who legitimately have enough money to just do it because, and some investors are coming in. There is the Gary Vee effect. There's all that. I don't want to get into all of that because that would make the video even longer. But long story short, I don't know what the future holds. I don't have a crystal ball. My crystal ball is broken. But as best as I can tell, I feel like the rosy optimism is maybe a little too much. Maybe my pessimism, I guess, is maybe too far to the other end of the spectrum, and the truth might be somewhere in between. But I'm genuinely curious where we're going to end up with, and it's one of those things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, and I'm going to be genuinely interested to see where it goes. What do you think about it? I would love to know, and like I said, if you think I'm wrong, tell me. I'd love to just know why. Or if you think I'm right, maybe you've observed something along the same lines. Maybe you're thinking the same way that I am. It'll be interesting to see either way, and I'm looking forward to the documentary, and I'm looking forward to some of this other stuff, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. And maybe I'll buy a 1990 Skybox Jordan, but I'll probably get the $4 one instead of the PSA 10 one. That's just me. Thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.